And these were artists such as Sebastian Smeg, who created an algorithm which pulled all images from Google, and it was very random. And what we started to see was how our online and offline realities started to converge, because all these images that were being pulled were masked, consumerism images. Małgosia Woznicka was from Poland. Joshing Arthur Liao is from Korea. Fikret Ete, he's Kurdish and is in Turkey. Pedro Hayes, who is probably very familiar to you all. Alfredo Ja, and Yuto Barada. And with each of these artists, we're looking at how the geopolitical issues of that area, how the geopolitical issues of that area is either being compromised, or there is a fluidity which is being fueled by technology. And that's it. So these are just some, there we go.
Hello everybody, my name is Pietro Della Giustina. I'm an Italian curator based in Paris. In 2015 I founded a curatorial collective called Curate It Yourself. We are punk curator, and the objective of the collective is to support emerging artists. And in addition, we decided to start developing a collection, because for us it's really important to also financially support the artist and pay the production for new works. And what I like of being part of a curatorial collective is the way of working. In fact, it's a non-hierarchical way of working in which the members, the free members, are really linked one to each other, and this can assure us a strong independence from external factors. And my personal research follows themes such as collaborative practices, artist collectives, no-profit organization, hybrid organization, and I really focus for example, also my residency here in discovering new alternatives for new economies and a different way of emerging within the art market. Of course, I have a really strong relation with the artists I collaborated with, so we will really discuss about their theoretical and practical researches, and for example, for me it's really important also the pedagogical aspect of my exhibition. In fact, I try to, in my exhibition, I exhibited, for example, the documentation of the researches and all the different steps that explore the different passages in the organization and from the conception to the realization of the exhibition, in order to explain to the public that are not professionals the way a curator produce an exhibition. Another important aspect of my practice is it's really relational. My curatorial practice is the relation with the public. So in many exhibitions, I produce tools, for example, user manuals, protocols, to encourage the public to participate in the creative process of the exhibition, and to make them really part of the organization of the show. For example, the next program I'm working is the organization of a show with the collection of a French enterprise of the and for example here I will involve the employees of the enterprise through digital tools in order to make them organize with me and with my collector the show. And later this year, I will have an exhibition in Italy in a 17th century castle that is called Castello di Laione. And the curatorial proposal will be to really investigate the history of the place, the history of the region, and we will organize like a residency with the artists in order to make them produce and we could say also enrich the history of the region and of the castle with site-specific and site-sensitive works. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Ceren Erdem. I'm from Istanbul. I'm based in both New York and Istanbul. Well, I worked in different structures such as Istanbul Biennial, the British Council, as well as some commercial art galleries, or from time to time had my own like initiatives. For instance, in New York when I was doing my master's study with like the other fellow students. And I look at actually various things such as memory theory, as well as like effects of the technologies such as on like surveillance on nature. But overall, I'm working more on where checking the, let's say, the global cities, and that is one of the reasons that I'm actually in Mexico. So I want to present a show that relates to the reasons that brought me here, and that is also related to some of the recent shows that I worked on in, or researchers that I worked on in Beijing, Seoul, and this time the show is, the exhibition is on Istanbul. So this is an exhibition that took place in Maxi Museum in Rome last year from December to May. It was the main exhibition of the museum for over 6 months. And it happened to be the largest exhibition of the artists and architects from Turkey abroad so far. It wasn't our ambition, but it ended up being that way. The title is Istanbul, Passion, Joy, Fury. So actually in any of these cities, like, so I'm going through the show and then I will tell you how we're kind of like decided on some subtitles, and these are not necessarily relevant to Istanbul, but you can explore. These are somehow tools that we can look at today's realities that are affecting us on global scales. And the passion, joy, fury are more like this things that are like kind of how we're attached to where we live, but also feel furious and fed up at the same time. This is the artist list. I'm going to flip through like images. So we started with this section, a rose garden. It was like the 0 point, like starting. In 2013, there was a big uprising in Istanbul in Gezi Park, and it affected a lot of, it was kind of like simultaneously in Brazil, like like soon after Greece, and in London. So that was like, you know, and Arab Spring was a few years back. So it affected actually the ways that some, like the artists and groups or architects, researchers, start to get organized and work as collectives besides their individual works. So we wanted to start with that uprising as a reminder. It wasn't a show on uprisings at all. So this section is more like the traces that the Gezi Park resistance left on the city, both physically and like emotionally. These are some photographs in an artist's performance. This is Ready for a Change, the second section of the exhibition. Istanbul is going through an enormous physical change, which affects also all social layers, economic layers, and there's a construction boom. We mapped the city, both formally and informally, with architects, urbanists, sociologists, with artists, and this is like the mapping zone. These are more artistic works. We'll go through. Okay, third section is Can We Fight Back? This is the section that we think not through like this physical or like the demonstrations, by being like keeping our way of living and like identities as a form of resistance. So it looks at like this, I don't know, like the social structures or LGBTQ works were in this section, women's rights. This looks at should we work hard as a labor and how we're dealing it, the production. This Home for All is questioning whether these cities, like I'm sure it's the same for Mexico, I'm not sure, but I try to figure out with all this like migration and like all this like different identities, if it's really a home for everyone or if it's kind of like rejecting all these, you know, others. And the last section was like tomorrow, really. So the whole section, the whole show was like. It was like very loaded and felt kind of depressive. So we want to question if there is a hope in everything and if art can create the hope, not in a naive way, but all these like remembering, knowing, acknowledging everything that we're going through, and if we can create some hope out of that. And all the graphics are by an artist that was a part of the show. Thank you.
I work mostly in Copenhagen and Oslo and Stavanger in Norway. In 2012, I started another space, which is a project space for art and architecture, together with an architect called Nicolas Marcus. We had a space in Copenhagen for 3 years, and then we went nomadic. So I'm just going to show a few of the shows we did together when we still had a space in Copenhagen. So this was called Textile Spaces, where we exhibited artists and architects that work with textile in a spatial matter. So also this, which you can see here, is Aurora Passero, which is a Norwegian artist, and Else Leirvik in the back. And then you have Tove Stork, which is a Danish artist. She's also actually exhibited here at ZsONAMACO at Nils Sterk. So you can see one of her works later if you want to. And then we did the Textile Spaces version 2, where we actually didn't show very much textile, but also worked with this kind of soft logic, where you can also think about textile in a more like philosophical way. So for example, Olaf Holzapfel, which is a plexiglass sculpture, but which is folded, and like how you work with layers and how you work with this and logic. What we've been working a lot with another space is the intersection between art and architecture, and also experimental exhibition formats. So in the fall of 2014, we did a exhibition in 3 parts, where we invited artists and architects to work in the extension of each other's exhibitions. So it started with Øystein Aasan, who got to start the whole relay, and he built this portal based on the torii portals in like these Japanese tories. And he just did this like one spatial rip. It's a very Norwegian way of saying it. And then when the next group came in, they had to work with this as a start. So what they did, this is a Danish architecture company called Verksted. So what they chose to do was to kind of multiply these stories and really build a whole environment inside the space. So in the end, you only see like a process photo right now, but in the end, you could actually like sit on top of this. You could climb this kind of ramp inside the project space. And then Florian Neufeld, a German artist, came in, and of course he had to deal with this space being already really filled up. So what he did was that he took everything apart again and used the same materials and built something completely else. So it was kind of interesting to see this, how can you work also with artists and architects that don't know each other. We have, of course, we know them, we know that they have something in common, they are open to experiment, they are open to actually show something they don't know, they take the risk to show and do something they don't know what the end will be like before they actually show it. So that is something we work with quite a bit, this kind of experiments and process-based exhibitions. And then we also do like very more other exhibitions. So this is actually a photography exhibition we did last year in Stavanger in Norway, where we also worked with this kind of where you go from sculpture to like with the intersection between sculpture and photography. This is a show. This is from a show in Berlin last year at In Situ, where we also took a very spatial approach. It's a project space called In Situ, and we chose to work with an Italian artist called Luca Vanello and a Japanese architect called Akane Moriyama. And so this is Moriyama's work, and she got the project space. We divided it horizontally in 2. So she had the level above the street because the project space goes down into a basement. So she worked with this site-specific installation with silk layers of curtains that you had to go through. And then Luca Vanello, he could only work under the level of the street, so he had to show all his work on the floor, or very low. So that is also, sometimes we have very specific themes, and sometimes we choose to work more like site-specifically. So I guess that's my 5 minutes. This is a magazine I'm an editor for in Stavanger called Contemporary Art Stavanger, which is another part of my practice, which is writing. So I'll just end there.
Okay, so hello everyone. Thanks for being here, sharing with us our practices. My name is Julia Morandera Rizabalaga, and I'm an independent researcher and curator, although, as you're going to see, I have also institutional projects that work in that work throughout these different layers of research. I'm going to actually share with you my current practice through 3 very intertwined moments. The first one is a research that that I've been developing, that has been accompanying me and even haunting me for the last 2.5 years, already 3 years, which is around the cannibal and cannibalism, both as a colonial construction through history, as, for example, Minerva Cuevas was explaining to us yesterday, but also as another form to engage with an ecosystemic way of relating and engaging with the exterior. So this is a way of like navigating history from non-linear parameters, from contemporary anthropology, for example, Eduardo Viveros de Castro and other thinkers that are linking it to Amerindian cosmogonies, to more politicized and more colonial constructions of history. This has been formalized through several formats. One was the exhibition format that happened in the Fondation Gadiste in Paris in 2015, and it's happening now in a second iteration in Hangar in Lisbon, but also has taken the form, for example, of a course in Miami through the notion of affinity, or how can we think the cannibal affinity, and how can we think basically the cannibal as a footnote through where to navigate history, no? That goes from the archives of abjection, of extractivism through colonialism, but also through other possibilities of thinking through the knowledge, through the body, producing bodily knowledge, and producing other forms of like relation through it and transformation. This idea of working with the different mechanisms of history is also something that I've been exploring for the last 5 years with a collective that I'm part of, which is called Magnetic Declination, Declinación Magnética, where artistic collective formed by 8 different persons coming from completely different backgrounds. Some of them are artists, some of us are curators, more researchers, teachers, performers. Basically what we try to do is also work with different, one of the first projects, like for example the ones that you're watching in the image, had to do with very simple and very near to us premises, such as how is the history of the so-called discovery of America still taught, reproduced, and perpetuated in the Spanish school system. So we worked through different workshops with students and created a film with them. We have many other projects that had to do with different forms of basically engaging with the political imagination of issues that were near to us. So from dispossession in Spain to the gag law that was passed 3 years ago, etc., which is this project. And the last one is my latest project that has to do with these mechanisms. It's called Atlas of the Ruins of Europe, which was an exhibition that explored basically how they explored the different narratives and imaginaries that build the history of Europe through the semantic of the ruin. Another project that I'm trying to show the work that I'm involved now. So this year I spent 3 months in Puerto Rico, in Beta Local, where I published this small publication called Be Careful with Each Other So We Can Be Dangerous Together, which was the prologue. It was a small publication made out of different conversation with artists, with scientists, with different people that I had been involved in the last 2 years, thinking about how affective economies can be produced, can be short-circuited to provoke other forms of affective exchange, but also material exchange. How the politics of caring works across the board of the institutional imagination and practice, and also how basically can we understand our practices as structures of support. So many people collaborate. It was all about, as I was telling you, the format of the publication was conversation. So it was, because it's a prologue of something that I'm developing later around the issues of the care and about what peligrosidad, dangerousness, being dangerous, can be reconfigured in this sense. So for this, for example, there was the one conversation with Diego del Pozo, who's a Spanish artist who has worked a lot with the notion of affective economies. And so we were having a drawing and a textual exchange. This is another very important contribution in this research was the Young Lords, which were a political, I don't know how to define them. They were mostly Puerto Rican, but can be extended to other Latino communities in the United States that fought for the independence of Puerto Rico from the 70s on, and that were formed in the Rainbow Coalition together with the Black Panthers. So many strategies that had to do with health of the community, from very micro-political and small gestures to more infrastructural kind of actions, were in the program. So I was very interested to know how to this political organizations delved with this notion of care. And the last one is La Brigada Puerta de Tierra, which is basically the neighborhood I was living in Puerto Rico when I did this research. And this is very connected to actually the main project that occupies my days nowadays, which is the foundation and the starting of the La Escuelita, an informal school in the Centro de Arte 2 de Mayo of the community of Madrid, which is basically it's a laboratory where to explore different methodologies, different forms of producing contaminated knowledges, and forms of dealing with different issues. This first season is going to be focused on infrastructure, speculation on infrastructure, and we're going to work more closely on climate warfare, effective economies, and the space is going to be designed by Vic van der Pol. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rachel Rakes. I'm from New York. I work as a critic, book and magazine editor, curator, film programmer, and teacher. One of the ongoing themes or topics that extends through all of these occupations for me is an examination of the documentary and historiographic research practices within contemporary art. Without over-ascribing its isolated power, I'm always interested in finding art's capacity to kind of do history, and to revise it and to use its interdisciplinary tendencies to facilitate historical research models. And as a result of my background in film and art worlds, I'm also always a bit occupied with trying to recast the views of artistic practices and documentary practices towards each other. So right now I'm working on a few things that hit in different ways on these issues. The first is a show in collaboration with a gallery called AIR. It's a long-running women's cooperative gallery in New York. In 1980, the artist Ana Mendieta curated a show at AIR titled Dialectics of Isolation. The show included Howardina Pindell, Selena Whitefeather, Judith F. Baca, and many others, including, as you'll see here, Senga Ngudi, who's setting up one of her nylon works, and Judith F. Baca, who's this series of this works called Juju Boxes that she made at the time. This is a Juju box called Juju Box for a White Protestant Male. The impulse behind the original show was to think about those women artists who were working in the US, who contributed to the American feminist movement, but largely did not benefit from it. So I'm working on a restaging of the show, along with a book that takes up the contents of the exhibition and re-examines this idea through the present, considering what has changed and then thinking about the career arcs or lack of career arcs of the artists involved, as well as how feminism interacts with the art world today, and who mainstream feminism might be forgetting today. More nascently and briefly, I'm developing another show right now that brings together artists who express political, historical, and scientific phenomena through fabrication and abstraction, creating, basically, in the end, to create kind of non-indexical documentary objects. The show prioritizes non-photographic forms, such as sculpture, appropriation, and painting, in order to reveal the documentary and evidentiary potential in objects and shapes. And then also to look past or try to embody and find new forms of data visualization. In my film programming work, I organized a festival called Art of the Real at Lincoln Center that showcases documentary art in a cinema context. We invite artists like Amy Siegel, Jumana Mana, Elizabeth Subrin, and Eric Baudelaire to show their works in kind of cinema conversation events, bringing their work back to a captive environment. And in terms of my writing practice, I recently wrote a piece about the London-based artist Rosalind Eshashibi, whose recent show at Murray Guy in New York called Two Tribes pairs an experimental documentary film with her own kind of semi-figurative abstract paintings in order for the form of one to kind of influence each other when seen together in exhibitionary space. So this is a little diptych I made of the two things. Similarly, I recently reviewed a show that's up right now at the Brooklyn Museum. It's a first ever retrospective by an artist named Beverly Buchanan, who was also in the Onomantieta show. One of Buchanan's lifelong practices was the creation of commemorative, prefabricated ruins that she placed all over the US South and otherwise neglected sites of violence and resistance from African American history. These often took the forms of these kind of slab works that you see here, but instead they'll be in grounds around the US South. Finally, I'm co-writing a book called Distant Present about the radical filmmaker Peter Watkins. This book examines the contribution of his work has made to contemporary media theory and collaborative critical practice. It demonstrates how Watkins's processes prefigure those of relational aesthetics and social practice, not to mention many moving image works in contemporary art. So the images here are from his works La Commune, from 2001 on the top. La Commune reenacts the 1871 Paris Commune with purposefully anachronistic flourishes, including these news reporters you see in the image. And also below Punishment Park from 1971, which proposes a dystopian but not entirely unimaginable scenario in which American subversives are detained and given the choice of a life sentence or 3 days in Punishment Park, where they attempt to reach an American flag on foot and without water while being chased by cops. In all of his films, Watkins operates a sort of live history. So in Punishment Park, the hippies, the Black Panthers, and the cops all play some version of it themselves. Similarly, in La Commune, the Parisian activists play communards, while the right wing, contemporary right wing in Paris, play the Versailles. I bring all of these things together through a course I teach called Documentary Aesthetics in Contemporary Art at Harvard. And within this class, I encourage students to kind of constellate their artistic and curatorial practices across several disciplines. And I'm just going to end with a GIF from Punishment Park. It became ungift in the PDF-ification of it, so thanks.
I think we have to leave, but if you guys have any questions, we're going to be hanging out outside. Thank you.